Hello again and welcome to another 140k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I'd like to say a huge thank you to Bill Sullivan for sending in some awesome pictures of his totally loyal stormtroopers. Yep, there's no snakes or hydras or anything untoward going on here. I'm just joking, Bill. Absolutely fantastic. I really like the change of camouflage effect that you've got going on there. It reminds me of when the Predator gets wet in the first Predator film and his camouflage starts like sparking and changing and then he becomes visible. Really, really cool. Really like the effect. So massive thanks for sending these pictures in. And if anyone else has got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, then please send them in to mordianglorytv@gmail.com, or you can post them on Facebook page. And don't worry if you can't remember that, there will be links and email addresses down in the description below. Without further ado, let's crack on with today's video. So the other day I was browsing through my social media, you know, like FaceTube and Ubook and all that kind of good stuff, and I saw a sad yet familiar sight. There was an Imperial Guard player who had posted a story about how he just had his ass beaten in his last game of 40k, and he's really struggling to keep up the morale. Now, you see this quite a lot, to be honest, and I think it's a real shame because Guard are not in a bad position right now. We're not in a top tier position, but with some of the latest changes that we've had with Arm of Contempt and our vehicles getting tougher and Hammer of the Emperor, we really aren't in a position where you should be getting smashed in most of your casual games. And so what I noticed with a lot of these stories is that there's a familiar pattern to them. There's the Imperial Guard player saying, I can't see my opponent's units turn one, and then they just rush from like cover to cover, and then inevitably there's like a turn one or like turn two charge. I lose something really big and heavy, I might lose like my Lehman Russ, and my firepower's got tied up, and then there's nothing I can do, and I just sit there getting tabled, or my firepower's tied up the whole game. There's nothing I can do about it. And so it's a familiar kind of story that you see, and it's a sad one because it's a fairly common sort of Facebook post to see, and that's sad because you don't want to see anyone having a bad time in their hobby. You want to see people having fun in their hobby. And it's also sad because it seems like the same mistakes are being made in every single one of these posts that I see. And so what I want to talk today, guys, is a couple of just sort of golden rules that you need to be taking into account when you are building your 40k list. Because I guarantee you, if you take these rules into, there's lots and lots of things to take into account, but if you take these rules into account, okay, then you will start seeing some more success in your lists, okay? So we're going to keep this quick, and I'm just going to say my 2 points, and then I'm going to justify them. So the first one is, you need to be taking indirect fire. I'm going to say it again, you need to be taking indirect fire. The amount of players that I see complaining about the fact that their opponent was able to hide their whole army turn one behind terrain and there's nothing they could do about it is wildly frustrating for me. I never leave home without indirect fire. Ever. Okay? Unless I'm taking like a meme list or a fun list, and at which point I can't complain if I lose because I've taken a fun meme list, right? But if you're taking a semi-competitive or just usable guard list, you need to be taking indirect fire, okay? Because there's a couple of reasons here. Firstly, we have the best indirect fire. Every other faction's indirect fire got taken round back like old Yeller in the last couple of data slates, and now Guard are pretty much the undisputed masters, or at the very least the people that have the best indirect fire. The best bit about it is no one else is really taking that much indirect fire anymore, which means you can shoot them and you don't really have to worry about counter battery fire anymore, okay? Which is really, really good. It means you can just keep pounding away at the enemy with your big, long cannons. So the thing that makes indirect fire so important is twofold. Firstly, it stops that situation that you just described where you get turn one and essentially you waste your turn one. You don't really want to advance forward because you know that your enemy is going to start taking you apart. You don't want to just expose yourself, and so you almost get struck by indecision and things are bad. So firstly, it stops that situation because you're like, okay, well, I'm going to advance forward and I'm also going to pound the shit out of you with my big artillery pieces. So that's the first thing that happens. It avoids you ever having a wasted turn one. The second thing that it does is it totally screws with your opponent, because your opponent is going to be like, well, do I even bother hiding out of line of sight now? Because if the guard players brought enough artillery, enough indirect fire, then what's the point in me hiding? I might as well try and go a bit more balls to the wall. Now, if he does that, that's a big mistake for him, because that means that he's exposed more of his stuff. But instead of you being screwed on your turn 1, he's starting to be rattled, he's starting to make mistakes, and he's making mistakes on his turn 1 and his deployment. So that's why it's really, really important to have that sort of indirect fire to sort of solve that turn 1 issue, okay? Now, there are other reasons why indirect fire is so important, okay? And it's not just about turn 1 stuff, it's about long term throughout the rest of the game kind of stuff, okay? And essentially, guys, the reason why you need this indirect fire stuff is because it allows you to prevent one of the most common tactics that people use in 40k. Leaving a basic bitch 5-man squad of something, be it intercessors or something else, just sat back on an objective, doing nothing and just scoring the enemy victory points, okay? If you have just a smattering of indirect fire, then you're able to entirely deny that tactic by your opponent. And this is really big, because most people are only going to bring 2 to 3 of these squads to just sit on objectives. Maybe they're 5 legionnaires, maybe they're 5 intercessors, maybe they're 5 strike squads, maybe it's 10 firewalls, you know, it doesn't really matter. Maybe it's something cheap and shitty that sits in the backfield objective, right? And what most people do in 40k, what a lot of competitive players do, is they take just the bare minimum of these essentially tax units, because most of the time people take like, oh, I'll take 3 squads of intercessors and they'll just fill up my battalion, and that's great, that's all I really need them for, and then they just sit on an objective hiding out of line of sight, and that's great. So most people only take the bare minimum of these, and then they put the rest of their firepower and the rest of their points into taking damage dealing units, okay? Now what's really important is that if you are able to fairly quickly pick up these little 5-man shitty holding units that your opponent has, then he has to make a really key choice. Your opponent has to go, okay, well, I'm going to not hold my own backfield objective. Okay, I'm not going to do it, or I'm not going to hold that side objective that I really wanted to hold. And so I'm going to start losing victory points that way. And if he's losing victory points, then that's good, because that means you're more likely to win the game. Or your opponent goes, right, well, I've got to redirect something else there. And so something that was going towards you as the guard player, something that was coming and putting pressure on you, right? Something that was putting pressure on you, now it's got to move back. And even if it's like, you know, maybe he had a couple of intercessor squads and then he had one more intercessor squad that was moving up the front lines and supporting, and then he's like, oh, I've got to send that back. That's 5 less guys that are coming at you. Okay, so what you've done there is not only have you messed with your opponent's game plan, but you've done something that often guard players struggle to do, which you have taken back the initiative of the game. What you tend to find with a lot of guard games, and it happens to me all the time, right, is that you tend to find that you feel like you're reacting all the time because you're not fast or anything like that. So people tend to get the drop on you and drop on your units, right? And basically what I call that is reactionary gameplay. Okay, you are reacting to your opponent. Your opponent is dictating the flow of the game. And you don't want that. You want to be playing proactively. You want to be dictating the flow of the game. And that's what artillery and indirect fire allows you to do. It means this focus will start coming back to you. Your opponent will have to start reacting to your plays rather than you reacting to his plays. And it just, once that happens, you're in a much more favourable position. And all of this is being done simply by taking just a smattering of indirect fire. Now, I know there's going to be some players out there saying, oh, but I'm a Scion player, I don't have indirect fire, what do I do? Scions can sort of pull off what I call pseudo-indirect fire, where you've got deep strike. Okay, what I'm saying with indirect fire is that you need to have the ability to target units that your opponent doesn't want you to target, that your opponent's trying to hide. And either that's you deep striking some sounds behind them and unloading with some plasma, or that is you firing artillery shells at them. It doesn't really matter. You just need it in one form or another, okay? So I know what some people are going to be saying, oh, so Morning Glory, you want everyone to be playing artillery companies now, but you just said like Met Guard's better and Leman Russell's better and all this kind of stuff. Morning Glory, you're constantly mixed signals. No, hear me out. I'm not saying you should go out there and buy a full artillery company. I mean, you do that if you want to, but that's going too far the other way. You know, in life, all things must be balanced. Balance is key, right? And so what I would say is when you're thinking of building your list, you want to be taking a minimum of 2, but really 3 sources of indirect fire, okay? And these are my recommended sources of indirect fire that you can take for your regular guard list. If it's Scions, it's drop plasma, yeah, or drop melt or something like that, okay? But you want to be taking 2 sources of full payload artillery. That's where you take the tank ace and you make it and you use it on a basilisk or a manticore, and you make it full payload. And what that means is it makes the weapons flat damage 3. Quite frankly, guys, if you're not putting full payload on a basilisk or a manticore, it's not really worth taking. You need that flat damage 3. Okay, now me personally, with the amount of Arm of Contempt that's floating around at the moment, I'm taking basilisks. Yeah, they've got potentially less shots, but the AP3 really makes a big difference when you try and snipe Marines out of cover. Okay, so for me, a couple of full payload basilisks is really good. Now for that third sort of slot, I think you've got two choices, really, two good choices. And I would be looking at either like a Medusa or Colossus or the Mortar Pit. Okay, now why am I suggesting not taking, you know, like another basilisk or a third manticore? Well, the reason I've said that is because I just said it before, guys. If you can't put full payload on either one of those two things, they really don't shine. So I want to go somewhere else, somewhere that does some more flat damage, right? And so the Medusa is great because it's basically an indirect fire Demartia cannon with like a 36-inch range, which is really, really good. And that D6 damage on average is doing like 3.5 or 4 damage, which is really, really good. So that's why I take the Medusa personally as my third big artillery piece. Now, you could also consider the Colossus, although this one is a bit more specialist. The Colossus, I think, is something like 3d3, strength 6 shots, damage 2, and it's okay, but the reason why I would put the Medusa above the Colossus is the Medusa can be fired into anything and it's going to hurt, you know, it's just like a Demartia cannon. Whereas the Colossus is kind of, yeah, you get 3d3 shots, so you know, potentially going to get more shots than that Colossus, than that Medusa, but it's the fact that it's only damage 2 really sort of lets me down because, well, you know, if you come across something like Plague Marines or something else that reduces damage by 1, its effectiveness bottoms out very, very quickly. But if you, it's not a bad third choice to take because it is perfect for just massacring things like basic Marines hiding out of, you know, line of sight. But again, it's lack of AP. Yeah, I just think the Medusa is better, but the Colossus gets an honourable mention. Now, the other one you could consider is the Mortar Pit. And this is one that you're really, really going to want to consider if you are taking KD. This is where you take 3 heavy weapon teams with mortars and a single platoon commander. It sets you back about 175 points. And the reason you want to take these is basically because if you're Cadian, instead of, when you do take aim, instead of re-rolling 1s, you re-roll all shots if you stay still. And your mortars are going to stay still, right? And so what you've got there is 9d6 shots with re-rolling all hits, and just think of that with Hammer of the Emperor, guys. All of those 6s to wound, are going, 6s to hit, are going to be auto wounding. So the Mortar Pit's a really nice choice. To be honest, any regiment can really take advantage of the Mortar Pit, but I feel like Cadians get the most out of it. So that really covers everything about that sort of first big newbie mistake that I see people making. That lack of indirect fire and that lack of appreciation for what indirect fire can bring you as a guard player. The other one that I want to talk about briefly now is screening. Now, screening is super important, and I've gone on and on and on about this for my entire YouTube career. So I'm not actually going to go and just say it again and again and again because people are going to be sick of hearing about it. I recently did a video breaking down everything you need to know about screening and why it's so important. So I'm going to link that at the end of this one. But what I'm going to say very briefly is that if you're finding that your firepower is getting tied up turn 1 and turn 2, you didn't bring enough screening. If you're finding that you're not able to do much and you feel paralyzed in your turns, you didn't bring enough screening. If you're not able to hold objectives or play the game and push forward, you didn't bring enough infantry, which means you didn't bring enough screening. Screening is probably the most important thing. I have literally been going on about it for about 7 years. You need to be screening your units, guys, and that's why I have a whole video dedicated to it. And rather than repeating myself here and, you know, stopping this video from going on too long, what I'd say, guys, is I'm going to link that video at the end of this one, and so hopefully the YouTube autoplay will do its thing and it'll take you straight from this video into that one, and it's got loads of visual aids as well. I literally use a camera, I use units, I use all sorts of stuff to really show why screening is important and how to get the most out of your screening. What I would say very, very briefly is, if you're taking a hybrid guard army that's a mixture of tanks, infantry and artillery, and you're turning up with less, really in this day and age, 120 infantry, I used to say 100, now it's really 120. If you're turning up with less than 120 infantry, then you're going to lose pretty much every game. Okay, you need that level of infantry. Okay, if you're running a tank guard list and you're not running several tanks or chimeras with loads and loads of heavy flamers, you're not bringing enough screening, okay? if you're finding that you can't advance forward because your precious firepower might get tied up, then you're not bringing enough screening, right? So you need to be thinking about bringing screening units. And like I said, watch the video that links to the end of this one, because it will tell you everything you need to know about screening. Okay, I said that word too much now. It sounds weird. Screening. Anyway, guys, that's it for today's video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please consider giving it a like and subscribe and a comment and all that kind of good stuff. To be totally honest with you, just being totally honest, any extra interactivity you can give this video gives it a massive boost. The YouTube algorithm really likes it when people thumbs up the video. So all praise be to the almighty YouTube algorithm. And you know, if you can give it a like, that would be absolutely amazing. Thank you. And if you've really enjoyed today's video, you want to go the extra mile when it comes to supporting the Mordian Glory channel, please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. It's thanks to the very generous support of my channel members and my patrons that I'm able to do this thing full time now, which still absolutely blows my mind. So massive thank you to all of my channel members and Patreon supporters. And I just want to say a special thank you and shout out to the latest people that have joined the Mordian 50th Rifles. So massive thank you to Scowdops, Golden Dragon Games, Jezza Shredder, Alex, Commander Baneblade, Colton Long, Friendly Neighbourhood Sunwheel, Bill Sullivan, Star Captain 007, Mitchell Brodu, Kyle Hines Manecki, Justin Mock, Dark Lord Corey, Scooter Pumpkin Shooter, Callum Dayton, Gabe Lincoln, F. Gustav, James Davis, Zach Ridgway, Blako, Jarrett Beck, Daniel Hintendorfer, Bob Wins, Max Lurker, Ickbard, Ted Richardson, Dom, Max Lowe, Phil Swift, Maz38, Highland Felix, Herb, Sandstorm, Eric Cruzat, Garsty, 0014 and True Elite Geek. We've had a real explosion of channel membership recently, which is absolutely fantastic. And one of the best bits about that is the more channel members we get, it means the more people that come and join the Discord, which is really, really awesome. We also want to say thank you to the latest Patreon supporters as well. So massive thank you to Cameron Lincoln, Jimmy Krekin, Nicholas Lewis, Alex Menzer and Navy Veteran. Massive thank you to every single one of you guys. Really appreciate the Patreon support. Now, before we end today's video, I want to say a personal, heartfelt thank you to all of the top tier Patreon supporters. These are the people that have gone above and beyond the call of duty when it comes to supporting the Mordian Glory channel, and I am truly, eternally grateful for all of their very generous support. To be honest, guys, it's kind of humbling. So I want to say a mass thank you to all of the Mordian Glory War Master patrons. And so I want to say thank you to Navy Veteran, Alex Stengale, John Stubbs, Nicholas Walsh, Swordfish Trombone, Diesel Fox, Ross Miller and Tom Sutton for being absolute mega bosses and being signed up at the War Master level. You guys are absolutely incredible. So massive thank you. But that's all for today's video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and as always guys, I'll see you guys next time.